In today's episode of the Iman Wire podcast.
We don't have a monopoly on the truth. The whole truth, the absolute truth is Allah, right? And al-haq, and we have to be willing to surrender to these different manifestations of the truth. Very different than alternative facts, though. These are the varying, diverse appearances of the truth before us.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Iman Wire podcast. Salim here with my co-host Irfan.
Hey Salim, how's it going?
Alhamdulillah, good to be here again with you. And joining us is a repeat guest who we're happy to have on the show again is our dear Shaykh Muhammad Mendes.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me again. Alhamdulillah.
Alaikum salam. You came at me fast with the salam. I wasn't expecting it. So. You must be really excited to get started talking about our topic, which is alhamdulillah. We wanted to bring you on, Shaykh Muhammad, to have a conversation about truth. And I think one of the things that we're seeing now today in our current culture, things which are trending, things which are how we determine what is legal, what is illegal, what is good, what is bad. What we're seeing today is what some people have called we're in the age of feeling. Whereas previous, for example, in Western civilization, there was an age of faith. And then there was an age of reason.
Mm-hmm.
And now some people describe what we're currently in as the age of feeling. And what that basically means is that our subjective reaction to something that we see will determine whether we determine that thing to be good, bad, right, or wrong, regardless of what other evidence may be there. How we feel about it is going to make us determine, okay, well, I think this is not right, I think this is wrong. So especially today now, where emotions and feelings will trump, pun very much intended, any rational arguments that are being made. And we're seeing an extension of that, even extending into religions and religious communities and how they determine and how the trends we're seeing of people thinking about what is halal even or what is haram even, how those standards are changing. So we wanted to bring you on to sort of basically have a conversation about truth and however way we establish the standards of truth. What have been your impressions before we dive into the topic about the standards of truth, the standards of factuality of facts and versus alternative facts, alternative news, fake news? It's all becoming something that people are talking about.
Bismillah. Beginning in the name of God. Again, thanks for having me again, and I'll say it a little slower this time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Peace be upon you and the grace of God and His blessings.
Wa alaikum salam.
Talking about the age of feeling, I think is another way of saying we live in the age of relativism, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or postmodernism, in the absence of universal, transcendent sources for truth, for morality, people are going to resort to what's most real to them. And for a lot of people, their feelings, their emotions are the world that they live in. It's the space, the mental space that they live in. And I remember when I was in high school, I had an incredible English teacher when I was a senior, international baccalaureate teacher, who used to tell us frequently, almost pitying us, you are growing up as children of the age of relativism. And I didn't really understand what she was saying. I was 16, 17 years old, right? But now, especially, when you talk about us living in this age of feeling, and a number of intellectuals kind of christened this age by that name, it's really hit home. That because there's in the public space, mainstream society has established that there is no ultimate truth, no ultimate measure, no absolute measure of what is true anymore, except for science, maybe, right? Except for science, maybe.
Maybe, exactly. Maybe
depending on what the observer is experiencing, what assumptions the observer has, especially when you look at quantum physics and quantum mechanics. But I think it's inevitable that we find ourselves where we are. And Muslims, I think, have a unique opportunity to remind people that there are these primordial, there are these timeless principles and methodologies for ascertaining what is true and what is false, what is factual and what is not factual. And I think having a conversation about that is valuable.
I think some of the difficulty that surrounds this topic is also people are not created in a vacuum. And so as they are raised up in a given time, in a given place, their views on reality, whether it be simply the reality that they see from a material perspective or the political order that they see or the monetary world that they look at those things, whether they know it or not, through the prism of other thought patterns, those of major thinkers, but maybe just those of the people around them. And so that kind of socialization of thought becomes a problem when people are given to just simply listening to and hearing whatever they're hearing within their own space, as you mentioned. So they're creating the space within their head, and their framework is only the framework of other people that's been kind of passed on to them. And it's not to say that people are not independent thinkers, but it is to say that in a country and a society which, actually likes to see itself as a society of free thinkers, that free thought has become such a polarizing topic. Because oftentimes those people who claim to be advocating for it don't seem to be actually objectively thinking about it. So historical facts don't matter. Spiritual truths or, points of creed, not important because I don't feel that way. I feel God thinks this of me. So how is it, do you believe as a community, and you mentioned Muslims particularly, how do you think Muslims can help to maybe change or shape the discourse to get back to more or less the ontological basis for our truth, which is rooted in our deep understanding of Tawheed, the oneness of God, and Him being the ultimate reality?
Well, I just want to say that I think the first thing we can do is resist the trend to use words like alternative facts. This double speak, right? It's double speak, right? Facts are facts, right? Either a fact is in accord with reality as we know it, and that's ascertained through, ascertaining reports that come to us through sources that are credible, that are trustworthy, that are verifiable, right? And just really holding that standard up. And to the credit of some of our journalists out there, they're saying, no, this is not acceptable. You can't have a world in which truth is subjective, right?
And that's Quranic, right? I mean, the Quran says, verify, that you hear news, you should verify it.
And it's interesting when you look at the Quran, there's basically three kinds of paths to certainty about a thing, right? And Allah uses the words ilmul yaqeen, ainul yaqeen, and haqqul yaqeen, right? Knowledge of certainty, the vision of certainty, right? And the truth of certainty. And we're talking about truth today. And the metaphor that's always been used to explain these concepts, one of them has always been that the first level of truth is receiving a true report about something. You haven't seen it, you haven't heard it, you haven't experienced it, but someone who's a trustworthy conveyor of that news comes to you. Right. And that's, again, why in our world, not only journalism, good journalism is important, but good scholarship. How to know you are receiving truth about what's halal or what's haram or what is a tenet of faith. How is that, how is that true or not? And then we have, the eye of certainty where you actually get to examine something for yourself. So you hear about the ocean, but now you can see the ocean.
Right. Experiential.
Yeah. Well, not experiential
That's
yet.
that's next.
Not experiential.
Not
I can still
experiential yet.
visual.
It's ayin. You can see it.
Yes.
You
The
can
sensory.
hear it.
Yeah.
But and then the last is what it's called haqqul yaqeen, where you actually experience that truth, where the subject and the object of knowledge become one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're not just looking at the ocean now; you're in the ocean.
Yep.
Right.
So it's real.
Yeah.
It's true. All right. So I think we need to go back to this paradigm of ascertaining what's real and what's not real. Teaching logic is really important. That used to be taught in schools, and I think it needs to be emphasized more than ever now. Good thinking is important.
Yeah, sound thinking.
Yeah, and that's a step. It's not the end. I think the end is a lot more profound, but it's the beginning.
So to kind of open this up in another direction, obviously we're in a time, every day there's probably something on the news, whether it's regarding, politicians and things that they're saying or the pundits that support either side. There's recent study that showed that basically people in these kind of echo chambers that we're just talking about, they only talk to each other. And so you can actually see this from a data analytical perspective that individuals are literally only connecting with the people that they agree with. And in that, there's this kind of self-edifying of what you already believe to be truth, and then at the same time the nullifying or the belittling, as you mentioned, this kind of this kind of double talk that people use, alternative facts, this and that. One of the problems I feel is that both sides play off each other, so they like to nitpick whatever they can on that. Just on a personal level, though, if you were having conversations with Muslims, I often find that even if they're not fully aware of it, they are engaging in that same type of mentality, and particularly with regards to other human beings, other religious traditions, other types of Muslims. And so they'll oftentimes say, well, those people, they just this and that. But the only thing they ever heard about those people or read about them have been people that have already agreed from where their own background is.
Oh, yeah. Or they've only read what Muslims have said about those people. They've never spoken to those people, directly. For themselves.
And if I can interject, what you're talking about, Irfan, is that's actually been studied, like neurocognitive studies. People naturally will, if they have a preconceived belief, they will process the information that will confirm that belief more so than the alternative information or the different fact. Confirmation bias is something that's talked about in even in scientific research, and it's a very real thing that naturally we as human beings do. So, but I like to hear, Shaykh, if you have any reflections in terms of how obviously at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and when the revelation is coming to a group of to the people there, they have also obviously had a preconceived belief of in terms of what they determined God to be, in terms of reality to be. Does the Quran address this issue of this almost confirmation bias, or this you're just following what you already believe or already think?
Yeah, absolutely. The Quran does many ayat of the Quran, many passages of the Quran. Allah Ta'ala teaches us, siru fil ard, go out into the earth, journey, get out of your comfort zone and go look at, human communities other than your own. Right? Allah says, Allah Ta'ala says, inna fi khalqi samawati wal ard wa ikhtilafi al-layli wan nahar la ayat ulil albab الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. Those who Allah says, indeed the creation of the heavens and the earth, the alternation of night and day are signs for those who possess innermost hearts, those who remember God standing, sitting when they lie on their sides, and who reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. Right? There's about 700 ayat in the Quran telling you to look at the creation, the structure of the physical world, to arrive at, to draw conclusions and deduce truths, about reality. Allah says in another ayah, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. We are showing them our signs, our proofs. Ayah literally means it's more than it's not a verse of the Quran. It's a sign. It's a proof
Right.
that's meant for you to reflect upon. And the ayah could be scriptural, or it might be something in the natural world
That
as
you're
this ayah
witnessing.
says, that you're witnessing.
Yeah.
There's about 700 ayah that tell you, look at the natural world.
Yeah.
Right. So the Quran is not giving you a circular argument, as some critics of Islam try to say. No, the Quran is telling you, look outside yourself, look at history, look at the signs on the horizons and in your own souls until it's manifestly clear to you that he is the truth, or that this is the truth.
Yeah.
So the Quran's constantly telling you, get out of your head.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, and I think, we talked about this earlier, what you perceive in the natural world, how you read history, is colored by your heart. It's a lens, it's a filter, but it is our seat of consciousness. It is the faculty. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, God says in the Quran, that they don't understand with. So you can have a heart, but unless the heart has been given everything it needs to function as the interpreter and of reality that it's meant to be, it could give you a wrong reading.
And that's one, if you could expand about this for our listeners, in Islamic spirituality, how you have the aql, which we consider the intellect, or maybe.
But what's really interesting, sorry to interrupt you, the word aql is never mentioned in the Quran.
Right. So, and that's what I was
going to. Even though the verb is.
Exactly,
right,
yeah.
Go
because
ahead.
what you were talking about when you're talking about the verse of the heart is making the reflection. The heart is what processing it. And that is sort of like the heart is the sovereign of
exactly.
the
and
human,
the intellect
the human condition.
is at the very most a sub-faculty.
Right.
Of the
so
heart.
if you could maybe touch on that a little bit, because some people may be like, wait a second, I have a mind that's not processing information. You're telling me the heart is.
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, when you look at neurocognitive science, it's not our brains that are the seat of conscious awareness. Your brain is a biochemical decoder, right? It takes the signals that come to it through your senses, and it interprets them and makes sense of them. But it is the heart that is the faculty of consciousness. That, at this point, science, it's beyond science, right?
And even in the Islamic spirituality, there's there's the fu'ad, there's all these elements.
And then the heart has different layers and levels, right?
Yeah,
there's about 5 layers of the heart, right? There's the sadr, the outermost level. There's the shaghaf, right? Then there's the fu'ad, which is getting into the core. There's the qalb. And there's the lub that we just mentioned, right? The very essence of the essence of the essence of the essence of the heart. Exactly. And it is the people who awaken this innermost heart that are able to really interpret reality for what it is. And that's why there's a beautiful prayer of Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He used to say, Allahumma arina haqqa haqq wa rizqna tiba'ah. Oh Allah, show us haqq, truth, as truth.
Yes.
Which means that you may see truth and not see it as truth and give us the ability to follow it.
Right.
وَأَرِينَا الْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا وَارْزُقْنَا اجْتِنَابًا, and show us falsehood as falsehood. Give us the ability to avoid it.
And I think it's very interesting that you were going through the teleological arguments. And I remember reading, when I was younger, Averroes, Ibn Rushd has this amazing treatise where he talks about this. But it's interesting that people can experience nature, can see all these things, and yet walk away denying those signs.
Sure. Yeah.
But oftentimes because they're stuck in their head. Meaning that they're not looking at things with this type of spiritual heart or experiential understanding. They want to rationalize, over-deduce things to make it bend, and so it fits what they already preconceive or
Right,
what
they
it
had
will-
a preconceived
or
there.
what they want it to be. So one of the questions I had is that, oftentimes as Muslims, to be more introspective, we oftentimes say that, well, no, this is our truth, or we have a belief, a core belief in our aqidah and the different beliefs and oftentimes Muslims will oftentimes conflict on these sub issues, these side issues, but they don't necessarily focus on the major issues that may be more of importance. And so just to give an example from history, there's a great work by a scholar by the name of Starr who wrote a work on lost enlightenment of Central Asia. And so he talks about how long it took for Central Asians to accept Islam. And then once they accepted Islam, how fast they were able to make huge advances in the fields of hadith sciences, but also sciences in general, like, both the religious science and the secular sciences. And so one of the reasons is that because there was this understanding of that Arabness of Islam that was so difficult for them to subscribe to, and they were forcing people to become essentially Arab. And so they reticently held on.
Some people still are.
Yes.
They're trying.
Yeah, they reticently held onto it. And it wasn't until much later and through some of the scholarly works of people like Ibn Yusuf and other people who engaged those societies actually traveled there. And he himself changed his own legal views once he moved to different communities in that area. And so it's interesting that once that started happening and their culture and their history was appreciated, they became voluntarily Muslim, I would say, in more that had happened centuries prior to that. Is there something that Muslims can kind of learn from their own evangelical history of spreading their faith that they would probably be wiser today when talking about truth to others? Meaning, is there a better way that we can communicate our truth than we are now?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think you said this, but it was a little implicit. It's not our truth.
Right.
Muslims do not have a monopoly on truth. Truth, one of the names of the divine is Al-Haq, the truth. And we don't own Allah.
Yeah.
Allah owns us, right?
Yeah.
So, truth transcends religion. Truth transcends religion. And each religion must, and religionists and people of religion must, every day you need to, make effort to be in harmony with al-haq, with the truth, right? So I think our history has shown us in Central Asia, in China, Islam was in China for about 1,000 years or so. And it was always looked at as something very strange and exotic. And it didn't get much traction until Chinese Muslim scholars like Liu Ji and others developed what's called the Hans Kitab, and they began to articulate the truths of the Quran using Buddhist and Taoist and Confucian nomenclature.
Yep, that's
right?
amazing.
And
in a language that people
using
were
their
familiar
philosophical framework. And once they did that, and the reason why they did that was not to convert Buddhists and Confucians and Taoists. That wasn't the main reason why they did that. The main reason they did that was so that Chinese Muslims wouldn't have this cognitive dissonance about their identity as Muslims and their identity as Chinese.
Right.
They wanted to give them they wanted to integrate fully who they were with their cultural identity, with their spiritual identity, with their religious identity. And I think we can learn from that. You don't have to be Arab to be Muslim. The Arabic language is intrinsically tied to the Quran. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan. Allah says, we revealed an Arabic Quran, right? And so knowledge of the Arabic language, particularly classical Arabic, is key. But culturally, you don't need to commit what is called cultural suicide in order to become a good Muslim.
You mean
you don't have to
eating
stop
hummus and weren't those?
Yeah, you don't have to wear a gutra and start eating falafel and shawarma to be a good Muslim.
Stick with my biryani, I guess.
The key is for every culture, and particularly for us in the West, is to zero in with our minds and with our hearts. on the timeless truths of the Quran, and then to locate those same truths in our own legacy, our own cultural legacies, our own philosophical legacies, our own socio-political context, and then articulate them again.
Yeah, exactly. Not only for yourself, but also for future generations, and that's like probably the main thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, so we get to that point where you are able to articulate the truths, these truths, to others, and who at this point, let's say they do not believe, maybe they don't believe in God, or they don't believe in a lot of the things that we're giving out. So obviously the Quran talks about people whose hearts are sealed, people who have who just will not believe, and I wanted to ask you in terms of, there's, especially nowadays, like where we're seeing such hardline opinions about people very set in their ways, whether it's like whatever, I don't know, all these sorts of opinions you're seeing on the right and the left, like in the American landscape, and it's getting to a point where people will just say like like on social media, for example, you'll see like a picture of somebody like evoking or advocating some very far right stance, or some racist stance, and then so sometimes the response from I see some it would be like khatam Allah ala qulubihim, or something like these people have their hearts sealed, things like that. But the natural tendency for a lot of us sometimes is to just be like, these are people who are lost. I'll put it, these are people who can't be redeemed. Yeah, well, how do you balance that?
No. That's a mistake. You and I do not know who can and cannot be redeemed.
But I think the emotional. What I meant to say is not like that. We know that, but I think emotionally, the reaction sometimes is like, these people, like they're never going to change. Why do you even talk to them?
And again,
don't even talk to them.
And again, that's a mistake. Right? Allah says, it's the same to them whether you warn them or not. They won't believe. It's the same to them, but not to you, because you're delivering the message. It's the same to them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really important. I don't think I've ever met someone who really doesn't believe in God. What usually happens for an atheist or agnostic is there's a particular concept of God that they reject. Right. And a lot of times they'll conflate whatever concept of God they've learned from their family or their culture or their society or from their schooling. They'll conflate that with God.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll reject God based on an assumption that is the totality of God. But I've sat down, and I have friends, who've sat down with, self-proclaimed agnostics and atheists who claim they don't believe God, and they don't believe in God, and there's no way to know if God exists, and describe to them some of the names and the attributes of God as we have, as Muslims, understand them to be. And they'll say things like, yeah, I believe in that, One of my friends, Sheikh Faraz Rabbani, said that there's a sheikh who had a discussion with an atheist, and he said to the atheist, look, the God that you disbelieve in, I disbelieve in that God too.
Yeah.
Right? But I know about a God that is beyond, that's only attributed with perfection and absolute beauty and power, and transcends all the defects that you've intellectually worked out that cannot be attributed to God.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's also amazing is that the way Muslims have always thought about these issues, like, it's not always a uniformity there. So, like, with issues of the problem of evil, for example, which is in Western theology, one of the major issues that people have, and he has his own word, like I think it's like quiddity. Theodicy. So these
justifying God.
Yeah, justifying God, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this whole, circular discussions that can happen with these types of discussions, and yet in the Muslim, even the people that are considered, I would say, more literalist or harsh, have created something called love theory in the Islamic tradition, like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Jawziyah, are well known to have this idea of ultimate love, as that's the ultimate standpoint that where God comes from. And they've got have their own critics within our own tradition. But it's interesting that can exist still, that there's these different thought patterns on how this manifests. But to kind of centralize something that you guys were just talking about is that oftentimes I feel like as humans, when we allow ourselves to give in to this tendency to only listen or validate ourselves through the similar voices or beliefs, we often then give ourselves the ability to take away someone's dignity.
We
strip them of their humanity, right?
Yeah.
So we strip them of their humanity, like our humanity is being stripped. And I think we were just talking about.
That's a survival technique.
Yeah, it's a survival technique.
It's self-preservation.
Yeah, and now it's an election technique, right? So now it's something that you utilize to maintain a certain level of political discord, and through that political discord will eventually, win out the day, essentially, right? So it's one of those things where it's, on each and every one of us, I would think, to maybe alter that prism. If you don't know someone who voted for a candidate, maybe not your candidate, or maybe who lives in a world that's not necessarily your world, shouldn't you try at least to, communicate with those individuals as they present themselves in your life? I'm not saying you should go to, small town America, open up shop, but I'm saying, you should at least within your daily interactions with coworkers or neighbors that may have different viewpoints politically or otherwise, to just have those type of human discussions to connect. What I think it was Ibn Rajab had mentioned in one of his works about the human collective, that those universal things that make us all human, that I know and what's actually wrong, because we're all human and we know that stealing is wrong. And we know that murder is wrong. We know these things are wrong because it is not something that is needed necessarily from a revelation standpoint. Yes.
That's the fawahish.
Yeah. So, this is what makes us able to live in pluralistic societies. And Muslims, despite what we may believe now, have always lived in pluralistic
Well, that's
societies.
the thing. And, when we were speaking, across my mind, and there may be people who are listening to this who are not Muslim, or there might be Muslims who are listening to this who are kind of doubting, whether Islam is true. Mm-hmm. And, I think that when we talk about the heart being able to, read reality truly with a clear filter, there are certain ways that human beings throughout history, and you'll find common methods from religion to religion that people have used to shed the heart of its biases, of its prejudices, of its blind spots, right? Yep. And I think, our scholars, like Imam al-Ghazali and Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya and others have done very good jobs of showing what are the universal methods of preparing a human heart, so that it can perceive reality.
Right.
What are some of those, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of those, some of those concepts of how to prepare the heart to be able to receive that truth?
Well, I think one of them is to, and I think one of probably the most basic, there's a number of them, but one of the most basic is to tell the truth. Right?
To live an honest life.
To be, siddiq, to tell the truth, even when it's against your own self.
Another Quranic principle.
Well, even prophetic, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ was prepared, before even revelation, as being the most trustworthy.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And he said, and this is kind of, it's related to what we've been talking about, but in another dimension. Right? Yeah. He said, the more truthful you are, the more true your dreams will be.
Right.
Right. Right. So the truthfulness of your speech has a direct corroboration to the correspondence of your dreams with reality.
That's interesting.
But that's just one way. And again, you'll find these from religion to religion.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should ever make the assumption that, again, that Muslims have a monopoly on truth. Only Allah knows the entire truth. Only Allah knows the entire truth.
Right.
Right. And a lot of times when you get into creed or aqidah, you're kind of given this idea that, look, this is the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And whoever adheres to this truth, you're good. And whoever doesn't, check all the boxes, there's something, there's fisq or something in their aqidah, there's something wrong with their theological standing. And I think in many verses of the Quran, Allah teaches us, Allah will inform you on the day of judgment.
Yeah, of whatever you did or whatever you happened. Yeah.
No, juxtapose this this Quranic Islamic emphasis on pursuing the truth, but where we are today, where actually people are actually calling our time not just the age of feeling, but like a post-truth era.
Yeah.
And that facts don't matter, that reality doesn't matter.
Well, some people would like that.
Well, yeah, some people have certain agendas.
The most money and the most political power can shape,
right?
What facts.
Yeah,
you would like Cambridge Analytica.
There you go, exactly.
They were literally, with the help of social media,
free data
companies. They were literally watching user behavior, and crafting a whole, online experience based on your own likes, your own loves, your habits, your appetites. It was a virtual world. Yeah, that was shaped. It was shaped and curved around your own hawa, your own appetites.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting with the whole Cambridge Analytica, which also gets off, is that people agree to be part of these social media platforms. Right. They sign these enclosures. They but they wanted to be a part of that platform, knowingly or unknowingly. That data was then utilized upon them to reinforce or to stigmatize, or in the words of some of the investigations, create discord within the American, voting bloc. And so it's just very interesting to see how all this is, all over the news now. We're seeing this, that our worst aspects of ourselves are being turned against us in a way.
Yeah, this is why spirituality is so important. Right. Because spirituality, and to be more specific, al-ihsan, right? The quality of selfless generosity of soul that is expressed through worship and service to others as if you're beholding God. That really protects you from being manipulated and being controlled. Yeah, because you develop this sixth sense, you develop kind of an intuition, and it's a very real ability, that people have been able to cultivate, where you'll know some things, you'll see things for as they are. You'll see the truth as the truth and falsehood as falsehood.
So as a final point, if you could, is there any advice that you could give for the truth seekers, just people trying to promote truth in this era that we're in? Because it's almost as if with this quote unquote post-truth era, that for the people who do have beliefs in truth, it's just like, I just can't, let's just retreat and do our thing, and whatever's going on in the
retreat to where?
Retreat, and exactly. But like
there's
idea
no retreat.
But there's a level of avoidance, because people are just like, everything's around us. Let's just not engage. Let's not try to challenge these falsehoods. What is the impetus of challenging these falsehoods that are being promoted today? How far do you go in trying to prove or show people that this is there's an alternative, there's a way of approaching things that you have not yet considered? How far do you go in that? Because you could just when you talk about all these arguments, or even the arguments for let's say the arguments for God, for example, like that. You could go in circles and circles with a lot of people making these arguments and talking about the different proofs for God, or the different, and the atheists have their. So how far do you get into it? I'm just saying, is there a certain limit of how far we should?
Well, you have to zero in on a person's true motivation. I mean, for some atheists, I'm not going to claim that this is in every case, but for some atheists, it's not. The belief or disbelief in God is not based on logic. It's based on empiricism. Okay? So you have to understand their language. You can't use a logical argument to prove God to someone who's a materialist.
Yeah, you can't. It's not going to be solved with some syllogism.
Okay? Yeah. You have to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And then for other people, it's neither of those. It's an emotional. Yeah. It's something emotional. Something happened, some trauma happened in their life.
Right.
And they're angry.
Yeah.
If there's a God, why did I lose my mother?
Yeah, exactly.
If there was a God, why was there a Holocaust? Right? If there was, and so on and so forth. So you have to really zero in on, what's veiling that person, from an honest embarkation in pursuit of truth.
Right.
All right. Secondly, a truth seeker, again, needs to do whatever they can to embody the truth in their own personal life. Telling the truth, standing up for truth, even when it's in your own family. It's very easy to, get on the front line, of a protest, against whoever.
Right.
Right. And, get a bullhorn and make a sign. And in your own, home, in your own family, ignore transgressions and against what is true and what is just. We can't live these double lives.
I'm going to use a buzzword, microaggressions.
Yeah.
So, I think it sounds a lot like when I think about this topic, I was thinking about Surah Al-Asr, which ends with this idea that after you believe that you should, وَالتَّوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, that you should be spreading the truth.
Yeah.
And then, so I think to Salim's point, but I think what's interesting that the surah ends with one more attribute that people should have, which is patience.
Right.
And I think maybe that's where sometimes we kind of lose the day or lose the argument, is that are we exhibiting this action of spreading the truth to combat falsehoods, to different narratives in different spheres, but more importantly, are we having the type of patience that's needed to really win the day?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you succumb, you know what, I'm walking away from this.
And perseverance, sabr is it's you persevering and not complaining.
Right.
Even when there's difficulty. It's difficult, it's hard. Right? But you're not complaining.
Yeah.
And you're not stopping either.
Yeah.
A lot of times you say patience, people interpret that sometimes to mean passivity.
Yeah, to sit back.
But sabr is active. It's an active acceptance of difficulty and only responding to that difficulty with positive action and engagement. The last thing I would just say about my advice for truth seekers, like Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayh, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, for me personally, his journey seeking truth helped me in my own journey seeking truth. And one of the things I learned from his life, from Malcolm's life, rahmatullahi alayh, is you cannot make any assumptions about what truth is. All right. And what may be true for you today may change tomorrow. And when God gives you more truth, when God elevates you to a higher realization of truth, you have to be able to let go. You have to be able to let go of, what you thought was the whole truth yesterday, and allow God to take you to a higher vista, a greater vista. And so he kept doing that throughout his life, right? And he was always passionate. He was always committed. But whenever God would raise his, deepen and broaden his vision of the truth, he went to that new place willingly. And I think truth doesn't have a particular form. There's even authentic hadith, sahih hadith, in Bukhari and Muslim, that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal himself to the Muslims in a form, the word that's used is surah, in an image or form, that they were never familiar with in this world. And as a result, they won't bow, they won't prostrate to Allah until he manifests to them through a theophany that they're used to in this world, and then they prostrate. These different tajalliyat. So again, we don't have a monopoly on the truth. The whole truth, the absolute truth, is Allah, right? And al-haq, and we have to be willing to surrender to these different manifestations of the truth. Very different than alternative facts, though.
Yes.
These are not alternative facts.
Yeah.
These are the varying, diverse appearances of the truth before us.
Well, alternative facts are intentional lies. Let's just call
That's
it
all they
is.
are.
So,
They're intentional lies.
Oh, they're my truths, So
yeah, so it goes back to what I think that's a great point to end on, Shaykh Muhammad, about of course the example of Malcolm, but the constant humility that's required and being willing to surrender. And that, of course, is what is the essence of our faith, and being surrendering to that. So on that note, I really want to thank you for this.
No, thank you for having me.
It's like we really enjoy having you on.
I feel compelled even to mention my own truth. I think it was before I read Malcolm's autobiography in 4th grade. That's when the Spike Lee.
How old were you?
Wow, that was
4th
early,
grade. I think I was like 11 or so.
Yeah.
My dad took us to a rated R movie. I think it was the first one we saw, and we were little kids. And then it was 92.
You mean the Spike Lee?
Yeah,
X?
Spike Lee. Yeah, so that was like a huge thing for me. And then reading his literature, and I still have kept his books, his speeches. I think the one truth is, like, I think every book report I've ever done in my life has been about Malcolm X.
Well, you know what he said. He said, I am for truth.
Yeah, right.
No matter who says it.
Exactly.
And I'm for justice, no matter who it's for or against.
Yeah, that's
and I'm first and foremost a human being, and therefore for whatever is in the benefit of human beings.
Yeah, mashallah.
Or words to that effect.
Great legacy there. Well, thanks for your time and
thank you.
And your presence. It's been
always
awesome
an honor
to hang
and a
out.
pleasure.
Thank you again, Shaykh Muhammad. And we're going to have you again on
Inshallah,
again.
I'm at your service.
Yeah, we'll go back to Jersey, to Salim's neck of the woods.
Are you from Jersey?
Yeah. I'm from Central Jersey. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You grew up there in the neighborhood.
So you're over
South
there.
Brunswick.
I'm gonna have to. We'll have to come up and inshallah see you up there and have another discussion about something that will get us in trouble.
Marhaba.
I think 90s hip hop is the next docket. Right? So,
well, the conversation about masculinity, sacred masculinity.
Oh, that went everywhere.
Let's not talk about that.
Part 2.
We have to go offline for that one. I got some issues. I
got a lot of interest.
Yeah, it did.
Sparked a lot of interest.
Yeah, it did. But so again, thank you, Shaykh, for being with us today. I want to thank the listeners for joining us in this other episode. Again, if you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, give us your feedback. All of this really helps get the podcast out to a greater audience. Share it with friends and family, anyone you think can benefit from this. Also, you can give us feedback at Al-Madina Institute.org. And until the next time, Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you.